how are you finding today so far? You've joined us for the beginning of our programme. You were downstairs. Have you enjoyed it? Anything that stood out to you particularly so far about the conference?
Really enjoyed the plenary discussion, and I've just had the privilege of going to the racial justice workshop led by Richard Reddy, which was an excellent and fascinating discussion.
Amazing. And so people watching online, you'll have the option to watch that one later on. They're online in the next session. So you've got a recommendation there that's the workshop that you should pop to. Amazing. So thinking about your work as General Secretary, I mean, you're fairly new to the role, but what are you finding the most rewarding elements of that role so far?
I love to see churches really working together and tackling issues. And so seeing some of what the churches have done from quite a wide spectrum around racial justice, particularly also a response to the refugee crisis. Has been, it's been a real highlight for me. So, yes, I think the Ukraine refugee crisis response and also the racial justice response would be my highlights.
Yeah, amazing. And then on the flip side of that, which bits have you found the most challenging so far?
I think honestly, I would say that the cost of living crisis is something that a broad spectrum of church just needs to focus on now. I think it's been emerging for a while, but it's definitely here, and it will be here in the long term. And I think that it's really important that we build a broad coalition of churches that are going to respond from the grassroots up.
And do you think that comes naturally to churches? Do you think we as groups of churches are good at naturally saying, this is a big issue and we need to work together on it? Or do you think sometimes doesn't come that naturally to us as a church?
Sometimes it comes naturally at a grassroots level, churches working together, but we know there are huge structural issues, and there are, of course, organisations here who are dealing with some of those structural issues. But the importance of churches being open to listen to those voices and to work alongside those voices, so that we can, speak to power where we need to, but also be listening to what's going on the ground too.
Amazing. I think that echoes a lot of the message that's been coming out of the session so far, which is really encouraging to see. So if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, how did you get to where you are today? What's your kind of background before you took over the role you took over in May?
Yeah, so my background, actually, I'm an urban planner by background, and so my first job in the very early 90s was working for Planning Aid for London with diverse communities around planning issues, and particularly in the public participation kind of side. So and so that's been really important. People being part of the process is really important to me. I spent 10 years in church ministry, pastoring 2 churches in West Yorkshire. I'm a Londoner, but a ministry took me to West Yorkshire. And then for the last 20 years, I've been in Birmingham and led a charity called Transforming Lives for Good, which works with young people excluded from school and gets churches to do the same, to engage those young people who are very vulnerable, and then latterly with Cinnamon Network around community engagement. So the community piece kind of runs all the way through as a golden thread, but I cut my teeth in local church pastoral ministry.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess, you say, for example, you've worked with children who've been excluded from schools, and then about transformation there. It's a good, I think, example of taking on a really difficult issue, which on the face of it might seem, hopeless or scary or difficult, and finding hope. How do you keep going? How do you keep engaging with issues that on the face of it feel very, very desperate or difficult? How do you unearth hope in the face of those issues?
I do think we need to take a long-term view. We've seen very recently with the murder of George Floyd. For many, they're still on that path, seeking justice. For others, it was a moment. Right. For me, it's about building a movement. And so I've always taken a long-term view. We have to be here on these key issues for the long haul. And that would be my encouragement. Even when you don't feel like you're making progress, don't give up. Because suddenly round the corner, a hopeful kind of story can emerge that actually leads the way. And maybe I'll say something about that this afternoon when I speak.
Amazing. And you've kind of already touched on it, but for people that are watching at home on the computer and are moved by this, what can they be doing practically to make a difference in their local communities if this has stirred something in them but they're not sure how to react?
Yeah, so the first thing I'd say is you can't champion every issue. I think that you've just got to know what God has called you in particular to champion. Of course, I know that my role is generic, but there are particular issues that I have a particular passion about. Sometimes my role is to support and enable others to be on the front line. Other times it's about myself, perhaps being a little bit more kind of in the fore. Right now, for me, it is about doing it through the local church and enabling the local church to tackle these issues. So my encouragement would be is don't try and do it alone.
Yeah.
The local church, for me, is the vehicle through which we should be working. And it's particularly encouraging when local churches work together in unity.
And that's why it's so exciting to all be gathered together today and be able to have these conversations. So we've really enjoyed that. We've enjoyed talking to you, Mike. That's been fun. And so Mike is going to be speaking to close the day today. So do look forward to that and listen to that, because I'm sure there's going to be more pearls of wisdom.